So the very first thing that I need to do to build this bandsaw cart is to make up that outer case. So to do that, I'm just gonna start breaking down some plywood.
I don't know about you, but I don't own a pickup truck, so I always have my lumberyard break down my full sheets of plywood into slightly oversized pieces. Then I can bring them back into my apartment garage and break them down into more manageable pieces and rip off those beat up factory edges with the table saw. Once they're cleaned up, I can rip the pieces to their final width. Recently, I made a video about this super simple crosscut sled that I made, and I'll leave a link down to that video in the description below. That link has step-by-step plans too if you want them. And speaking of plans, if you want the plans that will walk you step-by-step through this project, or any of the other projects that you've seen on my channel, hit that link down in the description below. Those plans walk you step-by-step through this entire project, have detailed diagrams, and everything else that you need to be successful. And for everyone outside the US, they're in metric too. Anyway, I set the stop block up to my desired length and got one square edge, then used my stop block to cut all the other pieces I need for the outer carcass. I just realized I never did the intro scene.
So with all the pieces cut down that are gonna make that outer carcass of the bandsaw cart, I could absolutely just go through and screw them all together, but that's kind of boring.
Chlorophyll? More like borophyll. Right?
And really the whole reason I'm out here in the garage is to try to improve my skills and try new things. So this morning I practiced making something called finger joints.
These are spirit fingers.
And it went pretty well, so I think that's what I'm gonna try on a full project here, and it adds a lot of strength and it looks cool. So let me show you how to do that. So to get started, you're gonna grab your stock miter gauge for your table saw, and we're gonna attach just a random scrap piece of wood to it. Whoa, Eric, wait up. I actually made a video going over exactly how the whole jig is made like about a week ago, and why don't we just skip that and just get to the point where we're actually cutting the pieces. So if you wanna watch that video, click that link up here or go down in the description below.
To make sure that I don't mess anything up when I'm cutting these joints, I labeled the mating pieces with the same letter. Before I start hogging out the material, you'll notice that my board has a lot of tear out on it. So to prevent that, I use a sacrificial piece of wood behind my panel to make the first cut. After each cut, I removed the clamp, slid the sacrificial piece over, and positioned the previous notch in the correct spot. This entire process is very tedious and it's easy to lose focus, but with all those blades spinning, you really have to be safe. With all of the notches cut out on the first panel, I went back to the workbench and marked out where I needed to make the mating notches.
Oh my gosh, it's hot. All right, so anyway, this is kind of the tricky part, but hopefully I can explain it to you in a way that makes it simple to follow. So this is the first panel here, and I just finished cutting all like the little fingers out, and you would think that this is side A, and this is side A, so the next thing you should do is basically just line this panel up and continue to go. But you'll notice that when I do that, it's not actually in the right spot. So what you need to do to make sure that it all works together and everything fits perfectly is you first need to flip this piece 180 degrees, put that back in, and you need to flip this piece. Now, those fingers will be lined up perfectly and you can just go through the rest of the build.
Honestly, remembering to rotate the mating pieces is probably the most difficult part of this whole process. That's why I prefer to mark out the joinery before I cut anything, just to double check that I didn't accidentally ruin a panel. Once the first notch is cut on the mating piece, I'll remove that first piece and continue down the line until I have all of the fingers cut. With all of them cut, you can see that they line up perfectly after a few hammer taps, but I could have lowered my blade just a touch so they don't stick out quite as much. While I cut the rest of the joinery, I want to take a second to thank all of my Patreon supporters who are truly getting me one step closer to being able to quit my day job and take this channel full time. If you'd like to grab exclusive merch like t-shirts, stickers, or sweatshirts, consider checking out my Patreon page and see if it's right for you. But as always, there's no pressure, so let's just get back to the build.
Oh. All right, so with that, we've got, well, you get the point, it needs a little persuasion, but with that, I've got all of the joinery for this outside of the bandsaw stand made. And I've gotta say, honestly, I mean, this looks cool and it's gonna be really strong and all, but I am never doing box joints again. Each one of these panels took me about 4 minutes. So I had to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cuts that took 4 minutes long. So that's like, it's like 3 hours worth of cutting. And it's really just not worth it. I mean, they fit great. These are slightly proud, which is actually kind of how I want them. That way I can just sand them and they'll be nice and flush, but this was a real pain, and honestly, it's just shop furniture, so if I were making this again, I'd probably just use pocket holes. But anyway, let's get this thing glued up and then we can move on to the drawers. All right, let's go inside, cool off, and get some dinner, and we'll get to this tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Like I mentioned earlier, the finger joints were a little bit proud of the surface, so I need to sand everything flush. And did I ever mention how much I hate sanding? Anyway, with the sanding finally done, I wanted to just add a little bit of reinforcement to the stand since my bandsaw is about 200 pounds and I figured it couldn't hurt. I cut down a few strips of plywood and brought out the trusty pocket hole jig to drill some pocket holes and then fire them in place. And to complete the back of the stand, I cut down a sheet of 1/4 inch plywood. Now you could absolutely use 3/4 inch here, but it just kind of felt unnecessary. The last thing that I needed to do was to make some feet where the casters would attach to the bottom of the case. After tossing a little glue on them, I could pre-drill and then fire in some screws to hold them on securely. So the casters are going to go here, and I could definitely screw them in place now, but I want to apply a little bit of polyurethane before putting on any of the hardware.
Ooh, right. So that'll pretty much do it for the main structure of the case for the bandsaw cart. And as I mentioned, I did put those little extra feet on the bottom. That'll just give a bigger spot for the screws that are gonna hold those casters on. But I didn't put the casters on quite yet because I want to put finish on this whole thing, and it's just a lot easier than, you know, putting casters on and having to remove them. So I'll put the casters on after finish. And now all I need to do is make the drawers. And I thought about doing 2 large drawers, but I think it's gonna work better if I do 3 kind of like medium-sized drawers. So let's grab some plywood and jump on the table saw and start making the drawers.
I like to build my drawer boxes out of 1/2 inch thick plywood, and those plans I talked about earlier walk you through every dimension that you need for these drawers. Once all the pieces are cut, I'll lower my blade to about 1/4 inch and start cutting out a dado to hold the bottom panel in place. Now, since those dados aren't quite big enough, I'll tap my fence over just a hair and take another pass. This scrap piece won't fit in quite yet, so one more pass should do it. The way that I like to construct my drawer leaves the back panel slightly shorter so that I can easily slide the bottom panel in place. So before I do anything to my fence, I'll raise the blade and cut those back panels since it's already at the perfect spot. See what I mean? Absolutely perfect. To bring the drawers together, I like to use pocket holes in the front and back since you will never see them. And maybe it's just me, but I absolutely hate that the drill bit always gets stuck in the head of those screws. With the main construction of the drawers finished, I'll cut down a few pieces of plywood that will fit perfectly inside the bottom. And if these were larger drawers, I'd probably use 1/2 inch thick plywood, but these drawers are really small, so 1/4 inch is totally fine.
Whew, all right. So I've got all of the bottoms cut that are gonna make these drawers. And the advantage to doing the drawer construction this way is, say that this drawer is, slightly out of square. When I go through and insert this panel down into the drawer, because this panel is square, as soon, oh, stand by. All right, here we go. As soon as that panel's in there, it's gonna pull the drawer to be perfectly square, and it's a nice tight fit, so it's not gonna be rattling all over the place. So I'm gonna put the rest of the bottoms in these drawer boxes, and then we can get them installed in, I guess you can't see it, but over there in the bandsaw cart.
And to prevent the bottom from moving around, I'll just fire in a couple screws from the bottom and you'll never see them.
So I've actually decided, instead of putting the drawer boxes in the stand right now, I'm actually gonna finish it. So I'm gonna use a little bit of this polyurethane, and I'll leave a link down in the description below if you wanna check this out. And I'm gonna spray it, so I don't wanna ruin my expensive camera. So I think I'm just gonna have to do one of these clever editing techniques where I like snap my fingers and that's just done. All right, cool. So cut it there and we'll apply some finish. I'm kind of hungry right now that I think about it. Yeah, let's just go get some food.
To install the drawers, I'll start by removing the inner part of the drawer slide. I can then toss in a spacer piece that I cut to raise the outer part of the drawer slide to where I need it, and grab a scrap piece that's the same thickness as the drawer front to make sure that I position the slide far enough back into the case. After securing the first slide, I can remove the spacer piece and install the next slide on top of the previous one. And repeat one more time to get that last slide positioned perfectly in place. With that done, I can slide the inner pieces onto the slides. I then grabbed some spacer pieces to raise the drawer box up from the base of the cabinet and slid the drawer box in. I can then slide the drawer box out just enough to reveal that first mounting hole, and I continued this, slowly working my way back to fully secure the drawer. Now, because these slides were recycled from an old project, they were just a little bit too long, so I had to pop the drawer all the way out in order to get access to those back holes.
Really? Nothing.
Now I can pop the drawer back in place, and after hearing that click, the drawer was all set. To install the next drawer, I laid down a spacer and repeated the—
Wait, hold on just a second. If you have a really keen eye, you probably noticed that on the side of those drawers, there's some notches cut out of the side of them. Well, to be honest with you, it's because I made the drawers a little too big, and I just had to route off a little spot on the sides so the drawer slides actually fit. I make mistakes too, but anyway, keep going.
Exact same steps as before until they were all positioned perfectly in place.
So now that those drawer boxes are installed and everything works pretty well, the last thing that I need to do is make the drawer fronts. Now, you could definitely just cut 3 random pieces and use them as the drawer front, but One tactic that I like to do is having a nice continuous grain flow through, and this isn't the right piece, but it'll illustrate the point. What I'll basically do is make a piece like this, and then I'll cut it at each intersection for the drawers. That way, when you look across all the different drawers, it looks like the grain pretty much continues all the way through. It's a small, subtle detail, but a lot of times those are the things that set your builds apart from everybody else. So let's get those cut and let's get them cut.
Although this method does require that you use a much larger piece of stock as opposed to just using a bunch of random scrap pieces, I think it looks really cool. So after the oversized panel is cut down, I'll bring it over to my cabinet and set it up on some spacers before marking out the places where the drawer fronts need to be cut. Then, it's as simple as bringing the piece over to the table saw and lining up the marks with the blade. That gives me perfectly spaced drawer fronts. I want these drawers to have handles on them, so I use this cabinet hardware jig to drill out the holes in the exact same spot for each drawer front. Back over at the cabinet, I could insert some more spacers and drop the drawer front in place. From the front, I'll drill those hardware holes all the way through the drawer box and then countersink the holes from the inside of the box. Then it's just as easy as inserting the bolts for the handles through those holes and attaching the drawer front with the handle. The drawer operates perfectly like this, but just to make sure that it doesn't shift over time, I'll fire in some screws from the back as well.
All right, so I just finished spraying this entire thing down with a little bit more polyurethane just to get the drawer fronts finished, as well as just an extra little coating on the sides and top and back and everything, just to make sure it's really protected. But now let's flip this thing over and put those casters on.
With the stand flipped over, I marked out where I needed to attach the casters. And after making sure to pre-drill those holes, I fired in a couple of screws with washers around the heads to hold them firmly in place. Dang, seltzer water is always in the way. Now all that's left to do is flip this thing over and remove my bandsaw from that horrible contraption it was sitting on from before and place it on the new stand.
You can do it, put your back into it. You can do it, put your back into it.
And after pre-drilling and firing in a couple screws, this bandsaw was locked down solidly to the stand. Now, I know what you're thinking, and I can already predict all the comments that are gonna be down in the comment section. You're gonna say that this is gonna be super, super unstable and top heavy. Well, this bandsaw has almost all of its weights concentrated towards the bottom. And in fact, the stand that this came with was about the same size, if not even smaller. So this is actually really stable. Now, of course, just like anything really tall, if you purposely try to knock it over, you're gonna knock it over, but if you're just using everyday use and cutting, it's not going anywhere. So if you're interested in building the stand, again, I do have full PDF plans for you that I'll link down in the description below. And I wanted to give one more huge shout out to all my Patreon supporters, and I'll see you on the next one.